Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. Through this podcast, I'm on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship as conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters, both new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by T&K Hunting Gear. If you haven't heard about T&K, then it's about time you do. I've been using T&K gear out in the field and on hunts and have fallen in love with their stuff. T&K is veteran-owned and 100% made in America using only American-made products. All their gear is covered under a lifetime warranty with no questions asked. If it breaks or fails, they will fix it or replace it for free. T&K is your resource for bino harnesses, bow slings, and a lot more amazing gear. For more information about T&K hunting gear, go to tnkhunting.com or search for them on Facebook and Instagram. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Freedom on and stay soulful. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by the Crazy Elk Company. Based out of the state of Washington with products made in America, they are providing solutions with gear to problems you didn't even know you had. Their tag wallet is one of those solutions, and I had the pleasure of using it on all of my hunts this last year, and it is now a mainstay in my kill kit. The tag wallet is a water-resistant zippered pouch that comes with its own reusable zip ties to safely and securely store your notch tag for quick and easy access. For more information, go to crazyelkcompany.com and use the code SOULFUL with a capital S to save 20% at checkout. Be blessed, everyone, and as always, stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Today we are talking turkeys, everything turkey, because for the very first time in my hunting career, I am going to intentionally hunt spring turkeys. 2021 is the year. Last year it was spring bear and drawn the very first tag. This year we are diving into the world of turkeys. I've shot a few turkeys in my day, but it's always been in the fall. More of the spot and stock, and you come across them out in the wild and running and gunning with the shotgun and having a blast, which is an absolute blast. But I've never experienced the thunder chicken in the woods, where we're talking about the correlation where it's like elk hunting. And so we're going to be diving into this conversation with Travis Arnott. Travis is an awesome guy. He's a listener of the podcast, and he also in 2020 filled his Washington State Turkey Slam, filling the Marions, Rio, and Eastern Turkey all in the same season. And so we're going to talk Turkey Hunting 101 with Travis and dive into everything that you need to know to be able to go out and hopefully be successful in the woods and fill that turkey tag. So Travis, thank you so much for joining us for a podcast tonight.
Hey, no problem. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it is always great building community, making connections, and getting to talk with people that you wouldn't normally talk with on a day-to-day basis. I'm really honored and humbled at the same time that you are even taking the time out of your day to be able to be on this episode. So thank you.
Oh, no problem. And the feeling's mutual. I'm honored and humbled that you would ask me to come on here. Just being like yourself, a normal guy, and just talk turkey. Like I think when you asked me about it, I says, well, how long you got? So it's my passion.
Well, we're going to try to keep it under an hour, but we're not going to cut it short if we're in the hot and heavy of it. So, Travis, give the listeners a little background on yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do, and then why turkey hunting is so important and powerful for you.
Okay, yeah, my name's Travis. I'm born and raised here. Lived here most of my life. Who I am, I think myself as mostly a father and a husband and a guy who loves the outdoors. Got into that passion. I was brought up in a hunting family, but turkeys were never thought of. I know they were here, but a buddy of mine kind of talked me into it back in the early '90s. He's like, "Hey, we should hunt these turkeys," and I'm like, "That's for guys like Bubba in Alabama. It's not." We hunt deer, we hunt elk. And he goes, yeah, but it's April and it's 70. He goes, usually you're hunting, it's, 38 and raining. It's like, yeah, you got a good point. So we kind of slowly got into it, bought a call here, bought a call there. And we just kind of messed around in the woods because he'd seen one in a location where they trap and transferred them down in Olympia, Capitol Forest area. And we dinked around a week or two here. And actually, I think our third year, I saw a track and scat, and I was done. Okay, cool. I'm in the turkey woods. I think I even notched the one tag I bought, and I went home. And then the next year, I kind of stumbled into one, kind of walking around. I was almost done. It was almost like you know what? I've tried this. You heard the stories. You don't call before you set up, and I was doing that and I did this for like 2, 3 weekends in a row. And I was just, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with this. This is goofy. And I decided I'll make one last call. There's a big cottonwood. Oh, go set up and put up. I'm not doing that. I'm done with that. And I just hit the call a couple times and said, see, nothing happened. And I took 2 steps, and here's like a 2 foot tall grouse walking down the road, and he's got a beard. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I'm looking for. And I shot him, got him. I got my first turkey, but it wasn't the sit down, call, strut, what you see on TV.
Yeah.
And those, and the next year was that, and it was like the books I was reading, it was like, hey, this is what he's doing. And for whatever reason, like it was exactly to the script of the book I'd read. And so I walked up there. He gobbled actually at the sound of my feet walking through the gravel. And he came in, and I just remember that it was so funny because it was like I calling, and he quit, and you get nervous. You're like, did I do something wrong? What's he doing? You just everything's going through your head. And then I saw blue in the woods, like a tarp, that color blue. And I'm
Uh-huh.
thinking, what is that color in the woods? And then his fan pops out. And I'm like, oh, and then he comes in, I get him. And it was, I think I was telling you earlier, I call it my Primos hunt because it was just like a Primos video. And that just took it off.
Uh,
After that, it progressively got worse and worse and worse. And now it's the only hunt I almost look forward to every year.
I love it.
And
I love it. On my spring bear hunt this last year, I was over in Eastern Washington, and all of a sudden I saw some turkey tracks, and we had a couple miles to go before we got to our destination. And all of a sudden I saw some scat, and I was like, let's hold up for a second. And we just let out a couple clucks, and all of a sudden right in front of us, probably about 60 yards. And it popped its head out. It looked at us. We were not ready to shoot a turkey in the middle of our bear hunt. And that was like the very first time I've been in the woods, had something respond back to me specifically in regards to turkey. Like
right.
we clucked, I got a response, and I was like, oh, okay, this is fun.
Yeah,
This is fun.
exactly. That first time any animal like an elk or a turkey responds back, you're like, oh man, oh this is it. This is kind of cool. I'm conversing with them.
Yep.
You don't know what you're saying, but you're conversing with them, and then yeah, it drives you to kind of want it. It's a different hunt.
Yeah.
It's a very different hunt. I mean, it's equated to early archery elk, but like my wife, she loves turkey hunting. Could care less to go deer hunting because most time you're sitting on a stump waiting or watching. But turkeys are you're interactive. The chess game is trying to, because in their world, the hen predominantly goes to the gobble. The hen searches out the male, where in every other species the male searches out the female. So we're in essence trying to break them of their habit, getting them to come search for us. And so that interaction of trying to figure, yeah, it's just the chess game. Like we were speaking about it, you get so, when the time comes, you get every emotion, your fear, you're elated, this is the coolest thing, this stinks. My butt hurts. I've been sitting on this root for 2 hours, all of that is 32 degrees. And then whether pass or fail on the hunt, you can finally let all that out.
Yes.
And I think the first time I experienced that, well, it's probably 10 or 11 years ago. I remember laying there, and it was actually a successful hunt. And I was just like, what is it? And I had to sit there and reflect and go, that's what it is. You got every emotion you could possibly imagine wanting to burst at the seams, but you can't move. You got to hold it. You can't blink. You can't twitch your nose. You don't even want to move your lips. It's like and so when you can finally let that out, that release, I think it's probably a little bit more the endorphin than actually killing the animal. I don't know. I mean, it's just it's such. I can't compare it to anything else.
Yeah.
I haven't early archery successful on an elk yet, so I haven't can't compare it to that. So that's what I've got. It's
Well, you'll have you gotten a chance to go full draw on an elk yet?
I
In so
have. I just saw the tip of his antlers, and it got busted by another hunter. But I was trying to figure out how do you keep the string steady enough to look through the heat because I was punching myself in the face, going and let down, and oh yeah. So I'm curious as to when I get the release. I have released one on an elk, and I missed, but yeah, that first time it was just that. How do you hold that steady?
So that's funny. All you listeners out there who can't see what Travis is doing, his anchor hand, he's saying is just shaking, and that's why he's punching. For me, my first elk, and actually, Travis, I'm going to rotate. You see that bad boy right there. I had to do circles. I had a great anchor, but my front hand holding the bow was just like doing these giant 14-inch circles. I was like, oh. All right, so let's get it back on the track of turkey talk. So here we are. We got spring coming up. Turkey season is one of the cool things about turkey season is if you get a tag for the spring, that tag's still good for the fall, even if you don't fill your tag. So that's what I love about seasons like that is you have so much opportunity to hunt. Just like this is why I'm such a proponent of bear hunting is, that season opens August 1st and it goes to November 15th. It's like, dude, there's always something to go be able to kill out in the woods and to bring home and enjoy. So when we're talking turkeys, this is going to be my first time going after spring turkeys, like I said earlier. I'm going to be breaking this down and asking a bunch of questions. Um, when I've talked to some people before that more live in like the Midwest, and we talked about this off air before we hit the record, a lot of people are always like, okay, for you to go find turkeys, you need to find the roosting tree. That's a lot easier said than done when you're living in the Midwest where it's a bunch of open like cornfields or wheat fields or soybeans, and then there's a group of trees. And it's like, okay, well, the turkeys are going to roost in those trees. Here in the state of Washington, you have like, over by Colville, the turkey capital of Washington, or down south, the Klickitat area and all this stuff. There's trees all over the place. So really identifying a roost tree and identifying where turkeys are, I feel like you more or less a turkey is where you just find it. How do you go about like scouting and preparing for a hunt, especially if e-scouting for big game animals is like, okay, well, south facing slope, here's water, here's, bedding, transition zones, pinch points, all that. Is it turkey hunting? Is that the exact same, or where do you start?
Yeah, it's pretty much the exact same. I mean, I generally started where, I knew turkeys had been either planted or seen, I'd seen some here, seen some there in years previous. But yeah, exactly. You're going to want some water nearby. They will travel quite a bit. I was told to me years ago, and I'd look it up and see if that's still safe. Like the Rio Grandes, which we have down in the southeast Walla Walla area, said they could travel up to 10 miles a day for water.
Mm.
So they're a roaming bird. Merriams they're a high mountain bird. They spread out quite a bit. I generally scout. I want to get up high usually because the toms are they know their voice carries more, so they'll kind of stay up high when they're searching and they're trolling and they're just shooting gobbles down this canyon or down that canyon. Same way, when we're locating for elk or anything like that. You're going to blow a bugle down in a deep canyon, see if you get a response. Toms are going to do the same kind of thing. So I kind of stay high. One, I can listen better. Two, I know they're kind of in the area. And I generally just start looking for their sign, scat, tracks, feathers, the typical stuff. I hear guys all the time like, yeah, I'm scouting for them. I never see them, but I find some sign of them. Well, they're there. They have eyesight that's 30 to 40 times better than ours, and they're very paranoid because they're very low on the food chain, and they know most everything out there wants to eat them. So they really are. They'll and they're so unpredictable. They'll run from anything, any kind of movement. It depends if it's not comfortable. So I'll get up high, look for scat. If I find scat, a place I'm scouting right now, I'm not seeing any birds. I haven't seen any birds except for when I hunted them, but I find their sign, I know they're there. And just listening, they should be at this point. They're probably still in the Colville area. Some of the other places, the Merriams, are probably still down low due to snow. They kind of congregate on the farmlands, easier pickings, less snow, all that. They'll start moving out, but they're flashing, they're starting to strut, they're trying to show off for the women. They're still fighting in their broods. They're very social, so their pecking order is going really hard right now, and their breeding season is going to be kicking off really good here in about another 2-3 weeks. Usually by the end of March, they're hot and heavy into it. But again, yeah, get up high, be willing to travel. Depending on which ones you're hunting, if there's a big concentration, Colville, you can probably get off any road, all through the central Washington basin. They're a little more spread out, so you might want to be thinking about hiking a little bit. It's nothing to put on 5 to 10 miles a day for me out of a gate, searching for that bird. And then the east side, these easterns over here just seem like a completely different animal at times. They're really reclusive. You really won't seem like you want to get away from roads, ungated roads, anything that's got any human traffic on it. It seems like the farther back you get, you start to find them. But again, the typical scat.
Okay.
And
Okay, so yeah, looking for sign, you see the sign, you identify, okay, turkeys have been here, which means they're likely to return at some point, see how fresh it is, all that. Once you identify a location, and I just want to take a step back for all you listeners out there who've never turkey hunted. A lot of people, I didn't understand this. I think this was like completely over my head. Is, well, the state's so large, how do you actually find where the turkeys are? Dive into the regulations and see what units you can actually kill turkeys, and then that means that there's a representation of turkey population in that game management unit. So that was just a little step back I wanted to say, because that was something I didn't know, and I want to make sure that we share this for people getting into the game. Now, once you've identified sign and in a region, I heard a lot about a crow call or any type of like loud, shocking noise causes
Mhm.
a turkey to like have a reflex and gobble back.
Yes.
Okay, so you find your area, you walk up high, or maybe you don't walk up high. Maybe you just start walking a road, and then is it kind of like you're just bugling every 100 yards if it was elk hunting, or doing these different things? How often are you blowing this crow call to identify where a gobble is?
Yeah, it is. It's just like locating an elk. They have a reflex. It's akin to kind of the old doctor tapping your knee with the hammer, and your knee moves out. It's kind of that way. You can slam a car door. Um, but yeah, if I don't know an area, I'll probably go a couple 100 yards, or if I'm up high, and I'll blow a crow call here and crow call there. Preseason scouting, they tell you don't use your turkey calls because that could educate the bird. Well, I think it can and it can't. I mean, they could come in. And I've had that problem before where I was trying to scout and crow call wasn't working and this wasn't working. So I yelp, yelp, yelp a few times and bang, I get a gobble. And I'm like, oh man. And then bang, bang, bang. He's like running up the hill. And I'm running back to the truck going, I don't want him to see me because I'm coming back in a week to hunt him, that kind of stuff. But I've had crow calls, owl hoots, elk bugles, coyote. The people sit there and, oh, don't use a coyote call because they'll equate that to a predator and they won't answer to it. Well, again, they got a walnut for a brain. They're not sitting there going, oh, coyote, I know what that is. I can't respond to it
Hmm.
because it's a involuntary reaction most of the time. Loud, shocking noise. Like I said, car door slamming, gunshots. I mean, we've actually worked birds after a gunshot.
Yeah.
we shot a buddy of mine years back. We got his Tom. The gunshot from his shooting, like, but actually shocked the one I shot like 20 minutes later in a goblin.
Huh.
And he's like, God, I got to go back to town and get another tag. And I'm like, oh, there's one right up here on the hill. I'm going after it. And I almost beat him back to the truck. I kind of was making my way up and I was using a little ravine. And I come around this big rock and he's just standing right there. And I took him out. And he's like, you got him? I'm like, yeah, your gunshot shocked him in the goblin. So they're not equating it to, oh, that was a 870 12 gauge.
Yeah.
It was a loud noise. So yeah, just go sporadic distances, throw a few out here, throw a few out there, maybe wait a minute, do a couple more, and then just kind of move on and just
I
go along with that. And
I love it. Okay, so one of the questions that just arose in my head is you heard a gobble and then you started to close the distance. Obviously, if you're shooting a bow and elk and you know you have to get within a certain range because of the type of terrain that you're in,
mhm.
what is it? How close is too close? How close is not close enough when you are pursuing a gobble and then if you decide to sit down and then try to call it in, or are you just trying to go directly to that sound as best you can? What do you do?
I'm gonna I'm gonna try and get as close as I can. But again, you got to be aware. I mean, this is where that chess game comes in of knowing when, knowing how. I mean, we've walked up, oh man, he's right here. If the sound is reverberating, are you picking it up off because I've had, hey, there's a gobble over here, and you walk past the ridge and he's behind you, but it's bouncing off the hill. So I try and get as close as possible because, the less travel he has, the less things can go wrong, the less time, because the hens are hearing him. And if they're involved, they're going to come out and maybe meet him up. And one in the hand is better than two in the bush. He sees a live hen. That's almost over and done with. He'll gobble at you all day, but you'll hear it getting farther and farther and farther away. You pretty much know he's got somebody in front of him leading him off. If you sense he's getting closer, uh, yeah, that's really part of that chess game of trying to figure out, should I sit here? Should I move closer? If I'm 400 or 500 yards out or farther, oh, definitely, I'm going to try and get a couple hundred yards at least. Maybe 150, and it just depends on how hot he is. If you can tell he's moving, you move 100 yards, maybe locator him, maybe give a little yelp, and if he hits again, you can kind of discern how close he is. It might be time to, oh man, we need to sit down now because he's on the dead run, or it's such a abstract question. Is the one thing with turkeys. Ronnie Cuz Strickland, I read it in his books, and I've talked to the man himself back at Nationals. His greatest thing with turkeys is the only absolute in turkey hunting is there are no absolutes.
Right.
But keeping that in mind, um,
Yeah,
yeah,
there's no like real playbook. It is what it is when you're out there. So I totally get that. Okay, so let's say we locate a gobble and we're trying to close the distance. We decide that it's time to sit down and try to call one in. Are you using decoys? And then with that, following it up, what type of calls are you using? And then we're going to talk about calls following that even more. So
okay.
take us through what you would do.
Generally, I'm good if I have the time, and I've got a decent opening where I think he might come into. I'm probably going to set out myself personally. Is probably going to set out just a single hen. He's heard the single hen. He could pop up and see it. I do set up a Jake and a hen at times. I'm iffy on setting the Jakes up because I don't want it scaring off. Because again, they're social. They might have gotten their feathers kicked a few million times the last time they've done it. My first bird, he he was a Jake, but his tail fan looked like somebody hit it with a weed eater.
Mm,
So my deduction was every time he's gobbled and came into this noise, there's been dad right there and kicked him to the curb and sent him on his way. So he was like, I'm just going to sneak in and see what's happening. And my Eastern last year was actually the same thing. They would gobble out here distances. And then there was another one in the back that you could just tell. Me and my partner at the time were sitting there going, the big guy, and then the hens finally took him away, and then all the other ones had come in silent. And mine actually, all the feathers on his shoulder were gone, and
Ah,
he had no qualms gobbling when he knew Dad was on the other ridge, going away from us. He's like, cats away, mice will play, kind of thing. And in fact, like a half hour later, we actually got another bird to come in, and my partner, he was in a bad position to shoot because of a limb, and just that little movement, and that bird was gone. Thinking, man, last time something moved, it spurred me, so I'm leaving.
okay. Yeah, this is
Back,
gonna. I got so many questions that I want to try to keep these in order because we're gonna get to the sitting still part because for me personally, that's hard. I have a hard time. I talk with my hands. I love to move around. I have an issue with like touching my nose and like all these things that I hear um we just got to eliminate and suck it up. But I don't want to get out of order because you talked about a hen. Sometimes you'll put a Jake out, but a lot of the times you're just satisfied with a hen. And because when a Tom sees a hen, it's gonna be like, oh, okay, hey, it's time to show off.
exactly, show up. Exactly, show up. The other thing, a lot of times in a deep timber, I won't use a decoy at all. One, if he's coming fast, you don't have time, and I don't want to waste that time. And also, if it's pretty condensed, most of the time, by the time they would see the decoy, they're probably in range anyways. And the old thoughts that back when I was doing seminars 10, 15 years ago, the talk was, and it's probably still true, that they can pinpoint you from about a quarter mile out to within like 3 feet. So when you make a call and he responds and he's like, oh man, he's 600 yards away, he knows exactly where you're at.
Hmm.
And he's going to start coming. And I've had him look me dead in the eye. I mean, my wife's first turkey, they came down the hill and they're kind of parading around in front of us at about 10 yards. And we're tucked in some really nasty brush. You couldn't see us at all. And the Tom she shot, I go, you need to shoot now because he's staring me in the eye. He's only like 10 yards out, but he was kind of just
Uh,
like that, eyeballing me. And I was like, he knows exactly where we're at. And we haven't called in 5 minutes. So you got that to look forward to. But yeah, deep brush, if they're coming hot, I don't even bother with a decoy. And I used to joke the old foam flambeau ones that kind of fold up and you put your vest. I go, they made a great pillow. You put that against your head, against the tree, and relax a little bit. Myself, like you were talking about, moving on a little bit, the fidgety part, you were asking me the other day about the most important thing I would take in the woods, sans your gun or any of that stuff. I think is comfortable clothing. Camo obviously it helps, and a good rest, a good seat, so you're less fidgety, you're a little more comfortable. You got a little more padding, so that cold off the ground isn't coming up into you. I use a one that has a frame built into it, so I can basically sit in an open field instead of a backrest. Anything that'll keep us from being less fidgety.
ah,
Um,
see,
because I'm scratching my nose and I'm twitching and man, what was that? And I got to find this call and whatnot. But I think, yeah, that's kind of why I was asking, hey, what do you got pointers on? Because I might need to ponder some of these because you're like, oh, what's the best thing to take? Oh, a gun.
yeah,
Oh,
duh,
yeah,
yeah, right.
exactly.
That
But
that
looking at a whole picture.
that makes total sense. I know. Getting into hunting, I pursued coyotes, and I realized sitting on the ground, my legs would start going numb, or maybe you have one leg under another, or you have to keep your heels into the ground to keep you sitting upright, and that it's not comfortable, especially when you're trying to sit for 30 minutes or however long on a coyote stand. When you're talking about sitting for a turkey stand, how long are you actually sitting there?
That it depends on on the hunt. Everything's abstract, the absolute part of things. It could be a half hour, 15 minutes. An old friend of mine that I got into the turkey woods with, his old saying was, "When you think of moving, wait 10 minutes." Because that turkey's just and sure enough, you hit it 7 minutes and you pop up. Oh, there's nothing here. And, oh man, and it runs off. It comes in silent, whatever. I've sat comfortably in a specific location for a specific bird for 6 hours. but I had the little gobbler chair lounger. It's like a camp chair, but it's only got like 4-inch legs. But I said, I'm just sitting in this one spot all day. Never got him. Never got, but I have sat that long. It's not uncommon to 2 to 3 hours if I'm working a bird and I think he might come in a little bit. He's kind of hot, but he kind of moves in a little bit. But you know where I'm at. Plus, they know where you're at to that 3 feet, 6 feet, whatever. If he has a hen with him and get back into the breeding cycle, and there's no playbook, but they do say, they come off the roost, they kind of mingle, they gather, at a certain time, about 7, 8 o'clock, they usually kind of do their breeding and then they kind of start going their own way. And probably heard this. Some of the best times to hunt is like midday because the hens have left the tom because they've got to go lay their egg. So they kind of mill off and he's kind of walking around, man, I got a girlfriend. And all of a sudden he's like, where is everybody? And then he gobbles, wondering where they're at. There's a lot of times they'll come back to where they heard you that morning.
Mm.
My first big tom, the one that heard me in the gravel, it was exactly that. I located him through calling, just trying to find birds in the morning right off the roost. He hit the roost, he hit down, and just for whatever reason, by the way he was gobbling, I could tell he's got hens. And he dove over a hill and was gone. He was a mile from me. And I says, you know what? I'm coming back at 10 o'clock because all the books are like, yep, from 10 o'clock to like 2 o'clock, that's the greatest time. And I came back at 10 o'clock and I said, I'm going to walk over that ridge where I thought he was roosting. And when I got over there, he heard me in the gravel and he was coming back to see if I was still there. And that hunt took like 10 minutes. So think of that when you're gobble out here at 600 yards and you go out chase him. I got to get within 200 yards and you call and then you hear it 600 yards behind you. He went to you when you were going to him, so that whole paradigm, the patience is key. So like I said, an hour, just like a good coyote set, you're probably half hour.
Yep.
Usually when you're calling, I'll probably, if I'm in a cold calling situation, I'll call a little bit. If I got no responses, I'll still wait a half hour because they heard you. Any bird within a half mile most likely heard you, even at the lowest little cluck or purr you did off a slate call, they hear you from 600-700 yards out, and they could just and then turn and start heading your way to investigate.
Nice.
So I'd say a good half hour, 45 minutes, and then if you don't hear anything, move on a little bit and try it again.
Okay. So that brings me to the next question, which I stated earlier about calls. So I'm a new turkey hunter. I bought probably a year ago a turkey diaphragm so I could cluck, like cluck cluck cluck, or I don't know. Honestly, I don't even really know the sounds. That's probably the the thing out of my league of what I'm talking about. But I've heard people talk about purrs, cuts, clucks, and then you have your gobbles as well. What is just kind of your basic standard of this is something that you at least need to know how to do in order to get any type of response or something coming at you? And then what type of call do you prefer? Is it a slate call, a box call, diaphragm, or I don't know, anything else that I'm missing?
No, the box call, the hinge box call, and I forgot to get any set up. I don't even know if I have any around here. Is the easiest to run. You're just going to kind of get an angle. Your basic call is get the yelp down. All turkeys yelp, even the males. They have a deeper, more of a yelp, 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 and more for fall. But get the yelp down. Then you can start working on clucks and putts. They're kind of the same thing. The putt is the alarm version of the cluck of like, there's something here. It's kind of like an elk bark. Clucking is just, I'm content. I'm kind of, so you got your pot calls are probably the easiest to run. Not pot calls, I'm sorry. Box calls, easiest to run. The push pin calls, the little box with a pin in them, you can just kind of hit those and they'll yelp and they'll cluck a little bit. I really stay away from gobbles, especially on public land, because that's what we're chasing. Keep the safety factor in mind that there's other guys fully camoed looking for a tom and they hear one, they're going to head toward it. Just as you are. So I really refrain from gobbling calls. I've used them a few times. I've seen the bad that they can do with that aspect. And I've had to lie low for like a half hour till things cool down in the woods because of that. And pot calls are probably a little more labor intensive. But I really like pot calls. I love a pot call. I can cluck. The purr is just that little content, kind of, kind of like that. Don't have my mouth calls on me, but I use mouth calls almost 90% of the time. I didn't start out good with them. My buddy said I was like a sick cow elk, and I gave up on them. But the idea of making that sound without the movement is what lured me back to them, and I finally learned them. Pretty proficient at them now. Was fortunate enough to win a state calling contest one time with them in this state. That was kind of cool. Got invited back to nationals where I'm like, yeah, right. I'm gonna go back against those guys. No thanks. I'll go watch them and hopefully learn. The other big thing with calling is don't be afraid to let it rip. You'll hear these books about, oh, 3 yelps or 4 yelps and a cluck. If you really get, and that's the other problem with scouting is we might not always run into turkeys, but if you get amongst them like in the fall and just listen to them and listen to like this one hen that's just yelping for 2 minutes nonstop, that's natural to them. If they hear yelp 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 in the same monotone sound, we're just box call yelp yelp yelp, they'll get that pattern down and go, yeah, there's something maybe not right with it. And I've seen that. Well, I had a late in the season when these turkeys are been pestered by everybody. If I yelp 3 or 4 times, no response. If I rip off about 15 or 20, what they call assembly yelp, they'd gobble because that was natural to them. They were sick of hearing every one of us driving up there every Saturday and yelp 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 yelp. They get in tune to it. They get numb to it, and they're like, it's nothing. Don't be afraid to kind of give the inflection. Have some emotion. I try to have emotion in my calling to sound more real. If I get kind of agitated, or if I hear a hen that's agitated, I'll kind of ramp it up with her. Or I'll try and how can I sound more seductive, if that's a word, or more real, so it's not just brop, brop, brop. It's like brop, 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 brop. Put some emotion into your calls. I think that has a big thing to it. But yeah, mouth calls definitely. And don't leave the house without them. Got a little can with about 6 of them. I usually run a couple, 2 or 3 pot calls and different strikers. Each striker, the peg that you use on the call, depending on the material, will give you a different sound. So you can carry one call and 4 different strikers, and you have 4 different turkey calls.
Mm.
So weight is an option. Time it. If it's raining, then you start getting in. What the conditions are. Slates are a little more soft. You're getting them. They're at 60, 70 yards. You need to calm them a little bit. You don't want to blow their eardrums out. We don't want the megaphone going off that you would with like a box call or really blowing a mouth call. You want to kind of tone it down. Slates. You start getting into the aluminums or the glass calls. They're kind of more broadcast. They're a little louder. You can still make them somewhat silent, but kind of how they go. And then, slate, obviously, when rain hits around here, and we get rain, slate calls, you might as well leave it at home darn near.
Right.
It's just
Well,
as soon as they get.
you bring up a really good point. Is hunting turkeys in the rain, like, is that something that is considered to be normal? Or is it you don't go out in the rain because they're not going to move around as much in the rain, or they're going to be, held up?
No, I take the twofold idea. The pressure's going to be less because most of us are like, man, I'm not going out in the rain. And then the other side of it is just like any animal, they live there. They live in that. So yeah, it might bring them down a bit. They might not just, oh man, I got 10 gobbles today and they were just running all over the place. This was awesome. The whole place is just a cacophony of sound, but they're still doing their thing and they live in that weather and they don't, they can't go in the house because it's raining.
Yeah.
They might hunker down under a tree or whatnot, but get a little bit of a break. Rain quits for a minute and they come out. I've killed them in the rain. I've killed them in the snow. The windy, that's really hard because you can't hear them. Really can't. And they tend to kind of, since they're so flighty, back to that, lowest prey on the totem pole, they're going to be out staying out of wind, and every little movement that they don't agree with just puts them on edge. So windy days are probably the worst, but yeah, rain, excuse me, rain doesn't seem to bother them too much because they're still doing their thing. It might tone them down a bit. Just like us, we're gonna sit, maybe get a little blind over us, and sit in one spot all day.
Okay, so that's a question that I had is is a blind, pop-up blinds. This idea that you can just go set up a blind anywhere in the woods that you want with that, and then it conceals your movement and you're free to move a little bit more. Is that something that you recommend, or is it a luxury item that people carry with them? And
It's a little bit of a luxury item. I usually have one in the truck if I have a good spot, and it is true that unlike deer or elk, they kind of got to get used to it. You could literally pop it up out in a field that you scared turkeys off, and they'll come back. We had that one year. My father and I was teaching him how to hunt, and we'd messed up a couple toms, and one was a really big guy. And we knew it. And I says, you know what, Pop? We're walking back 2 miles to the truck. We're getting a blind, and we're going to plant it right where we sat. And we did. Big, 8 footer. We're both sitting in there, kind of staying warm and nice. And we literally had a hen run into the blind. She's like, she hit the corner of it. It was one of those. It's like, I really gotta, hadn't heard anything forever. Dad, I gotta step outside for a minute. And I hit the zipper on the blind. You hear, puck, puck, puck. Oh man, turkey's right here. And we watched her walk up to the corner of the blind, bump into it, kind of like she's been drinking, and then she walked off and had no mind to it. It was just a piece of brush to her.
I want to,
And
yeah, I want
his
to
dad.
jump in and and share something because my buddy Jeff out in North Dakota, he went turkey hunting, and he was with a buddy, and they're like, okay, the turkeys are going to be coming from the other side of that field. And so Jeff, my buddy Jeff, was like, okay, let's set up a blind here on the edge of the field. And the guy was like, no, let's go set up the blind in the dead center of the field. And he's like, isn't that going to like throw them off, like you were saying with deer and elk or whatever? And they're like, nope, you just, it's less distance that you have to call them to you. And so they went and set up set up the blind in the dead center of this field, and before you know it, they had turkeys on the ground. It was, I was like, I was blown away, really.
It's amazing how oblivious they are to certain things, and then not oblivious to the next thing. That's back to that absolute. But yeah, you pop them up anywhere. A lot of guys, I'll take I got one friend that carries about a 5 foot sheet of burlap, kind of looks camel, and he'll just kind of drape it over him like a blanket. Kind of breaks up. He can not hide some of his movement. I'll pop up. A lot of times, if you're into lightweight hunting, you're doing a lot of hiking, you want to keep your weight down a little bit, I'll carry a little, it's only about 2 pounds, and it's just about a little 2 foot blind, and it's just a piece of camo that's about 6 feet. It's got some stakes, stake it out, and it gives you just a little pattern out in front of you to kind of hide if you're using a boxer or a slate or whatever. You're a little fidgety, you got to kind of wiggle, get used to it, give you some protection. I like to have some protection. Um, Anytime I'm out there. It just anything I can do to conceal the movement. I don't think the camo, while they do see color, the camo can be important, but it's more that movement. Anytime you can conceal any of that, the better off you are. That's probably the best thing I can say about that.
That's some really good advice. And well, what about this? Is how often are you, in your experience, you turkey hunting and you're chasing a gobble and you decide to sit down and you expect it to be coming at you from the front, and then you have birds actually come from behind you that have just randomly showed up to the call? Is that how? Is that something that you always got to be keep your head on a swivel or eyeballs on a swivel at least because you don't want to move that much?
Yes, yes, very much. I've had them come in behind me, gobble, scare the life out of you because you're listening to the guy out in front of you, and he comes in because the one year I think I was blocking his view of the Jake decoy, but he saw the hen decoy, and he gobbled. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 yards behind me. Never knew he was there. And I probably threw everything and went like that, just kind of came up out of my shorts, and he run off. Back to the elk hunting thing. You got the herd bull. He might be talking to you, but those satellites that kind of want in on that action are gonna, back to that one that was silent, and the silent ones, they've had their butts kicked a few times. They've run into bad situations coming into a hen. So I'm just gonna kind of sneak in. They're not gonna use the wind. Turkeys don't smell. If they smelled, we'd never kill them. But they will, just like I said, like a satellite bull, they'll come sneak in and see if they can pick off that one hen before dad gets over there and corrals them all.
Okay.
So yeah, very real. And more times than not, I've had guys, my wife and I, we've had them walk in between us. It'd be a hen, but 2 feet from you. Where'd that thing come from? Coming from behind. They'll just, because like I said, they heard you from a quarter mile, and they might go investigate that noise because they're so social. They are so social. They want to be in a group. And yeah, you got to be 360, paying attention to anything, get out of the corner of your eye. Just, you better hope you catch him before he catches you, is how those ones work.
Okay. What about if you end up bumping a turkey? Like you're walking down a trail, all of a sudden there's one standing in the middle of the road because it always happens with hunting, and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, crap." Are you chasing it after that point, or is that more of a lost cause and you're like, "Okay, well, now it's time to go find another bird or another flock or whatever."
That's good. A lot of times, if I bump one, I might give them a few minutes. Most of the time, they're back to we put too much human thought into them.
They're
They
birds.
don't know
They don't
what's yeah,
yeah.
exactly. They don't know what scared them. Something scared them. I don't like it, and they'll run off, and give them 15, 20 minutes, and maybe throw out a locator. Throw a crow call out. And the best way you throw a crow call out or anything like that is you want them to reveal themselves without you revealing who you are. Hen yelp, you might get that silent one to walk in on you in 2 minutes before you're ready. You're standing there. Where are we going to? Oh man, he's right there. Crow call. See if you can get him to respond. Maybe, and if it doesn't respond a couple times, I'll throw out a couple yelps. If he responds, then he didn't. He's forgotten all about whatever scared him. But then the next day, you'll scare that bird, and he won't cross that road for 4 days
Yeah.
for whatever reason. You can be standing on the other side with a naked hen showing off to him, and he's looking at it. He's like, nope, nope, because something scared me 4 days ago on that road. I'm not crossing it. And then, 5 days later, he's back to running up and down it. So but I will chase them if I'm not scared them too bad. Again, we've had them come back in from gunshots. I've gotten back on birds after I shot at them. I've one of my favorite birds with the whole family. I think I shot at him twice in a weekend. He pitched out as my dad's tripod stool sunk into the dirt, and we had the blind and shotgun and dad and the stool rolling down a hill, and the turkey standing there going, "What was that?" And he ran off, and we got a shot at him again later in the day that I missed. And then finally, I think a couple weeks later, I actually did get him. But yeah, we hunted the same bird multiple times in the same day. He'd come back in, he'd forget all about whatever that was.
Yeah.
So it's really, yeah. Don't be afraid to try it.
One of the coolest things is that I think so many new hunters get caught up in the I need to do it by the playbook rather than just going out and learning how to hunt. And spring turkey hunting is a great excuse to go scout for other animals and see where animals hang out when they're not pressured and all of that. And I think it's such, kill two birds with one stone kind of thing. Go hunt turkeys in the spring, and also go take a look at what else you want to hunt. I've been having a lot of people ask me lately, "Hey, where do you like to spring bear hunt, or where should I put in for spring bear?" And I'm like, "Well, where do you want to hunt?" I guess is the question, right? Because I know I want to go over to the northeast corner of the state because I know I'm going to be there in the late season for turkeys. So anytime that I have an opportunity to to scout for multiple animals at the same time and still enjoy my hunts, I'm gonna do that. It's I think it's often forgotten. People forget about the art of hunting, and they think so much about just hunting one specific species and being like, okay, well that's my target. So
I agree. I agree. Because when you're kind of dead, you don't hear any birds. I'm, always staring at the ground looking for sheds.
right.
Great time to find sheds. Everybody loves picking morels during turkey season, when everything's kind of turkeys aren't bugging you. But yeah, it's a great excuse to get out there. Back to your point of guys that like there's a playbook. We didn't have one as much when I started back in the late 90s. I started later in life at turkey hunting because like I said, it wasn't around. But I went out there, I read those stories, read those books from those guys back east, and then you start, like we talked about the roost tree, start figuring out, hey, it's different out here or different out there, and there's no real wrong way to hunt them, using the calls and whatnot. But they're going to teach you so much. We've got a couple ridges where, if we knew what we were doing, they'd probably be extinct on that hill. But it was just like, oh man, why did they do that? So yeah, that's the best way to learn is just get out there. And that's kind of why I think I was wanting to reach out to you is like, you get that question a lot. It's like, nobody's ever taken me. I need somebody to take me. It's like, yeah, that's great. And I have no problem, but I didn't until probably 15 years into it actually hunt with somebody that knew more about them than I did, and not saying I knew anything about them, and just get out there and try it. Life happens for you, not to you. If you want a turkey hunt, grab a couple calls. I've had an old rusty pair of channel locks. I was like, I could get a tom to gobble off those. That's the way they were squeaking. I was like, and they will at the right time. If he's right, I've had them, we could do it with our mouth and we don't even sound anything near like a turkey. And if I'm running on, but getting into that don't sound like a turkey. The worst calls I've ever heard were turkeys. You know, we hear these calls and we want to practice and we want to sound like, Michael Waddell or Preston Pittman or any of those guys at the national level. But the worst sounding, and if you make that mistake, I really don't think it's like when you mess up on an elk call where they're like, oof, I don't like that, I leave. Turkeys make so many weird pops, clucks, squeaks. Don't be afraid to try them out. If you're using a mouth call and it just beep, don't worry about that. Especially if one answers you. Oh, hey, I'm onto something. Get out there, just call, just do it. Yeah, I took a young man hunting, and I stopped at this ridge, and I says, "I think we should call here," and he just stood there, and I'm like, "I'm not doing it." And he's about 13 at the time. He goes, "But I'm no good at it. How are you going to get there?" So I had him start calling it, and this is can't outgive good. That kid now is like a number 2 in the world goose caller, and I get a little sense of pride going, you know what? I bet you I had something to do with that. And that's great. I'm glad to see where his spurred off and took off to. And who knows how that had an effect on him of letting him call. So get out there, call.
Yeah.
You scratch, make noise. You can't learn without doing.
Totally agree. All right, the last question I have for you, and then we're gonna wrap this bad boy up, is so many.
Man,
I know you could do this forever, huh? It's fun getting on a podcast. I get so many people are constantly. They get nervous when it comes to a podcast. It's so much fun to just keep chatting and let this roll. Wrapping this bad boy up, Travis. So many people have always told me to go in dark and be in the woods before dark for turkey hunting. If you don't know where the birds are at, is that a good idea, or is it more start with that break of dawn and then start working your way in?
it's that's a good question. Personally, I still like to get in there dark. If I know there's been birds or it's a known area that have birds, I might not have any scouted. I'll still try and get in there in the dark, get up high. Um, and myself, I like to let them tell me. I'm not the guy that's out there owl hooting and crow calling or locating, 20, 30 minutes before fly down if I don't know there's any birds. I kind of want let the world back to the whole nature and creation stuff. To me, there's nothing greater than watching the world wake up.
Yeah.
Quiet. Let those guys start. Let the birds start. And usually, the songbirds will start, and you might hear one go off. But I kind of like that quietness for the refreshing your soul, watching the sun come up, and then let the world tell you what's happening. Don't be too much in a hurry to make something happen. Let it happen for you, and most of the time it works. But yeah, I'll still get out there in the dark, as they're not gonna see as well. They still see well, but they're not gonna be as skittish as during the day because they got things bump them all night long. There's deer walking under their tree or whatnot. I don't think that bothers them too much in the dark, but once they can really see, and they're kind of like, yeah, that thing doesn't look right. So,
Mhm.
um,
That's
but
gr-
yeah, I like being out there before the sun comes up.
that,
Definitely.
that's great advice, and I love hearing what I gathered from what you just shared is that so many times people feel like they have to control the situation. They have to be, okay, this is the plan, this is what we do, this is the steps. Just go out there, sit back, and enjoy nature, and things will naturally unfold, and you'll know what to do when the situations arises. I,
Exactly. Exactly.
I love that. Travis, thank you so much for joining us for an episode. This has been extremely informative. I already got all my different things lined up now since you and I have been talking turkeys. And if anyone has questions or would love to follow up with you a little bit more about turkey hunting or any of that, how do they get a hold of you?
Um, Personally, I'm on Instagram. I believe it's Travis Arnott, just all one word. I didn't get that prepared in time.
No
Um,
worries.
uh, yeah, what is it? Yeah, exactly. But I believe that. And if I come across it, I'll give it to you and let them know. Yeah, more than free to talk turkey with guys. This hour blew by really fast, and I don't even know if we scratched the surface yet. Just how much fun I have turkey hunting. It's the greatest time for me during the year. Just I can't get enough of it, and we only got 2 months to go.
I love it. Yeah, it's the itch has started, man. Cabin fever has kicked in full go. Waterfowl season's over, upland's over. What's ahead? And it's turkey time unless you get drawn for a spring bear permit here in the state. So I love it, Travis. Thank you so much. I'm really excited. I don't know if you've ever come to one of our community events before. I'm pretty sure you haven't. However, I'm going to be branching out with Washington Backcountry, and we always do these community events. Only in 2020 we didn't get to have any of them. I think I'd like to just start doing like mini seminars, uh,
Oh, I
little
love it.
little events where it's like, okay, hey, here's we're gonna talk turkey, here's we're gonna talk elk, and do these different things because the community, like what we said, where we were connecting, it just it's how the world's supposed to be. It being in community is so right and it's so comforting and yet it's exciting also. I always believe that inspired people inspire people. And so you being inspired about turkeys is getting me going. Me getting inspired about just hunting is getting you going. And you constantly just share that energy flows and life is good. So Travis, thank you so much. Listeners, go check out Travis. Give him a follow. If you got any turkey questions, shoot, don't ask me. Make sure to go hit up the man who knocked out his Washington State Turkey Slam last year. Travis is the man. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. As always, freedom on and stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you could go ahead and give this a rating as well as subscribe. Also, you can check us out on Instagram under the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Make sure to tag us in pictures and posts and use the hashtag Soulful Hunter. To find out more about the Soulful Hunter Podcast, go to soulfulhunter.com and be sure to follow the podcast as we are going to be bringing you a lot of great information, insight, and changing lives through primal adventure. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Stay tuned and stay soulful.